Hello, I'm Askar Sherlief and you're watching news from Kazakhstan, and here are the headlines. A police officer was killed in October while trying to arrest criminals. The local Internal Affairs Department says the incident is not related to extremists' activity. Mukhtar Jakishev, the former head of Kazatomprom nuclear holding company, was found guilty of selling uranium deposits and corruption, with the judge giving him the final sentence of 14 years in prison. Disney's Brave is released internationally this week, including the version in Kazakh language. Experts predict poor box office since dubbed films are not known locally for making big money. Another police officer was killed in October on Thursday morning while trying to arrest crime suspects. A 30-year-old traffic police inspector, Temirbek Zhaksılıkbayev, was shot dead. At the same time, the internet was flooded with rumors of a suicide bomber detonating a device next to the building of the October Security Committee department.
Internet users rushed to make a connection between the two incidents, adding that in the first case, the policeman was allegedly killed by a follower of non-traditional religious movements. However, the local police department rebuffed this theory. According to the press service of the October Regional DIA, a patrol car was sent to the site near the village Kirpichny on a call of a driver who was assaulted. While one policeman was providing first aid, Zhaksılıkbayev followed the criminals on foot. In the ensuing shootout, the officer was shot in the head, chest, and abdomen. According to local DIA, the second incident involving an explosion was a false call. The policeman died at the scene from gunshot wounds. A criminal case was initiated on this case of murder. At the moment, the investigation team is working on the case. The other incident that you mentioned is actually a false call. The panic on the internet is understandable since the October region remains the leader in the number of terrorist attacks. Last May, a suicide bomber detonated a device inside the NSC building, while in July 2011, a special operation was held in villages Shubarshi and Kenkiyak to eliminate a group of radical Islamists who killed 2 patrolling policemen and later an Arlan Special Force operative.
2 contract soldiers and the head of the border outpost Tirsaik have been arrested in East Kazakhstan region. The information was reported on Thursday by the Military Prosecution Office of the country. Officially, the men are suspected of beating conscripts. Representatives of the Military Unit 2017, which includes Tirsaik, are not commenting on the information at the moment.
It's not true about the beatings. Officers agreed for an off-the-record interview only. They said that 11 soldiers who left the Tirsaik border outpost without authorization on June 18th are now held in the Zaysan military unit, explaining the situation to prosecutors and investigators, with a criminal case and investigation still underway. In the meantime, the access to the border area has been restricted. Military command officials believe it will take a week for things to settle down. It is said local residents are not concerned about the incident after they learned about it from the TV news. Despite official leads, it is rumored that soldiers left their post for a dance party in the neighboring village and now talk about military hazing to avoid punishment. Nevertheless, most Zaysan residents believe there is no smoke without fire, and the young border guards did come under pressure at some point. There was some kind of pressure. They wouldn't have left the post for no reason. They say they ran away. They were very young. I don't know for sure, but I think they were beaten up and they couldn't stand it any longer. You know what happened recently? The massacre at the Arkankirgan outpost. It really discredits the frontier service. I did my time in the army, but I can't understand what is happening with young guys there now. How are they going to defend us?
On Thursday, a court in Astana put an end to the notorious trial of Mukhtar Jakishev, charged with illegal sale of the country's uranium deposits. This was already the 2nd criminal case against the former head of Kazatomprom, the state-owned nuclear holding company. The sentencing unexpectedly was made public, even though the trial itself was held behind the closed doors. More details in the next report.
10 years in a maximum security prison. The former head of Kazatomprom is convicted once again. Mukhtar Jakishev was found guilty of illegal sale of uranium mines. As the judge Nabi Pazilov said, the new term will be absorbed by the more severe punishment from the first trial, where the former top manager of the national company was sentenced to 14 years on charges of accepting bribes and embezzlement of entrusted property. The defendant is to be sentenced to 14 years of imprisonment in a maximum security prison with confiscation of property and disqualification to hold leadership positions in national companies for a 7-year period. The sentence is to take effect starting May 21, 2009. The convict himself was not present during the indictment. At the beginning of the second trial, Jakishev and his attorneys Nurlan Beysikeyev and Palada Tipsaeva expressed their distrust of the court. They said they did not expect a fair judgment because the process was conducted behind closed doors. As per written response from the Ministry of Industry and New Technologies, information about the uranium mines is not classified state secret. In protest, the defendant and his representatives refused to participate in the hearings. This led to a public defender, Gulmira Shaldikova, being immediately appointed as Jakishev's attorney against his will. No comment. I took part as I was appointed by the court. Take this away from me. The defense considers the court ruling over the second trial unfair and will take it to the appeals court, said Shaldikov on Thursday. Jakishev himself continues to disapprove of the attorney. Therefore, another of his representatives, Nurlan Beysikeyev, will be appealing against the verdict. All the rights of subsurface use of uranium deposits in Kazakhstan have become the property of foreign companies, the majority of which are all Russian. All of this has been taking place under the current leadership of Kazatomprom, yet for some reason it is Jakishev who is blamed for it. At the same time, the victims' party seemed to be satisfied with the trial. After the verdict was delivered, Kazatomprom official hurried off to avoid reporters, while the lawyer of the mining company emphasized that there are no hidden political motives in persecution of Jakishev. What motivation do we actually need? Is he some kind of politically important figure? He's a big business executive, not a politician. I don't even know who could have asked for this. As for the damage caused to the state, I can only estimate it as gigantic. I have no comments. If you want to know whether this information is actually classified, you need to officially address this issue to Kazatomprom for an answer. As mentioned earlier, the prosecution of Mukhtar Jakishev began in May 2009. According to experts, the reason for this was his friendship with the exiled banker Mukhtar Ablazov. Yet the authorities deny any political motives. Nurlan Beysikeyev wasn't surprised by the latest verdict. He explains that to save face, the government had to logically finalize the trial initiated against the successful top manager. Jakishev's attorneys are planning to continue to fight for their client.
Politicians and public activists continue discussing the unfair trial of the former head of Kazatomprom, Mukhtar Jakishev. They claim that the second process was just as politically motivated as the first. The criminal persecution of the top manager is often linked to the friendly ties of Jakishev with the exiled politician and businessman Mukhtar Ablazov. Here is what the experts had to say on the matter.
When he learned about the new term for Mukhtar Jakishev, the former top executive at Kazatomprom, politician Bulat Abilov said that the trial was orchestrated. Even if embezzlement within Kazatomprom was confirmed, it is not the top manager who needs to be brought to trial. Abilov believes that anything that goes on inside the national company happens with the government's consent. If the press was involved, Mukhtar could prove easily that according to certain laws and decrees, this information is not considered a state secret. He did not sell anything as it was sold by the government and Energy Ministry, and all he did was follow their orders. Here are the letters, assignments, and orders that this is it. If this was the case, everyone could see that the trial was orchestrated and turned into a political issue. The man is made accountable for things he hasn't done. Agirem Jakisheva, an elder daughter of the accused former head of Kazatomprom, was not at all surprised to learn about the court's verdict, sentencing her father to 14 years. As everyone knows by now, my father was found guilty as charged and sentenced to 10 years in prison. It was obvious right from the start that he will be found guilty, and the verdict announced that the closed trial will not be soft. One thing that's not clear is why they needed this 3-year-long circus. Maybe because they wanted to keep my father behind bars as long as possible and damage his health. The whole trial and even the term of 10 years is a throwback to the Soviet-era trials of the 1930s, where there were no attorneys and jury. Politicians have shared their views regarding the reasons for putting Mukhtar Jakishev behind bars, some of them believing that the authorities simply wanted to seize the money-making Kazatomprom. Others say the friendship with politician Mukhtar Ablazov brought about the political context. They certainly want to punish Mukhtar because he was friends with Mukhtar Ablazov. They even shared a room when they were students. Now their friendship and their connection is the cause of criminal persecution and lengthy sentences for Jakishev. This is ridiculous, really. To recap, the criminal persecution of a young top manager started after an ex-MP from the ruling party, Tatyana Kvyatkovskaya, convened a conference in April 2009 and demanded to initiate a criminal investigation against Jakishev. Back then, the president of Kazatomprom. Kvyatkovskaya accused him of selling uranium deposits at knockdown prices and lobbying Ablazov's interests. The next day, Kazatomprom company's official site denied all accusations. That, however, did not change the course of events, and Mukhtar Jakishev was eventually brought to trial.
The measure of restraint for the arrested stage director Bulat Atabayev and politician Janbulat Mamay was left intact. On Thursday, their attorneys have filed an appeal to the Almaty City Court demanding to reverse the ruling of the Almala District Court. However, the motion was rejected. Therefore, civil activists will remain behind bars until the court hearing, or at least for 2 months. The main argument of Atabayev's and Mamay's defenders is that the activists did not participate in the hearing. Neither attorneys nor their clients charged with inciting social hatred had been invited to the process. The ruling was made in absentia, changing the restraint measure from own recognizance to a 2-month arrest. Besides, the attorneys believe all the case evidence is indirect and also refer to the age and health condition of Bulat Atabayev. Yet this didn't convince the judge. This trial is just a formality to distract attention. Had it been fair, they would call on us openly with attorneys present. On Thursday, the Almaty City Court revised the motion of the head of Aman Saulik Foundation, Bahit Tumenova. She was brought to administrative responsibility for organizing a May 31st rally to commemorate the victims of political repressions. The woman attempted to appeal the ruling but was still fined about $500.
In her speech, Tumenova, having gone beyond honoring the memory of victims of political repressions, touched upon the issue of the public and political order of the country through sharp criticism of the country's leadership and blaming it for the Zhanauzian events. At the same time, her speech was accompanied by portraits of people currently under criminal investigation. That is Kuramshin, Sapargali, Kozlov, Atabayev, Mamay, Amirova, Aron Atabek. Activist Georgy Arkhangelsky came to support his fellow dissident. For participation in the same action, he was fined over $200. Bahit Tumenova's arguments that the day to commemorate victims of political repression was officially established by President Nazarbayev, and citizens have the right to talk about it. They were ignored by the court. The appeal has been declined, and the initial ruling remains in force. Tumenova was a moderator at the rally in the park across from the former NKVD building. Almaty residents laid wreaths and flowers, honoring the memory of those who died during the Stalinist repressions. The activist was fined for standing up for the present political prisoners, as well as calls to make the authorities responsible for Zhanauzian tragedy and stop persecution of dissidents charged with inciting social hatred. Our court did not pass the test for lawfulness, honesty, fairness, and independence. I will pay the fine for my pension as if it is really big. The fine is over $500 and the pension is less than $400, including transportation benefits. I'll pay it to make them happy.
13 years in maximum security prison with confiscation of property was asked by the state prosecutor for the former head of Zhanauzian, Orak Sarbapeyev. The process against the ex-mayor was launched following the recent Zhanauzian trials. During the debates, the state prosecutor cited the testimonies of witness Zhanat Sidikov, who confirmed bribing Sarbapeyev in the amount of $50,000.
The prosecutor also requested a penalty that could deprive the ex-mayor of Zhanauzian of rights to hold governmental office in the next 5 years. In the meantime, the defendant is still not accepting charges, saying everything he did was done in the interest of the city. According to one of Sarbapeyev's 3 attorneys, the requested 13-year sentence is absurd when it is based on the testimonies of a single witness, who just might be a drug addict. The trial is scheduled to continue on Friday. I believe these charges are ridiculous. First of all, there is no evidence based for the case on the official bribery. At least they need to present some evidence that can rationally or logically prove that he was bribed, but they don't have anything at all. Some drug addict is accusing this man of allegedly receiving a bribe from him in 2011 or 2010. They have yet to prove it.
Workers versus Kazakhmys. Sacked engineer of the copper processing giant was re-employed and recovered around $3,500 at a recent court ruling. The decision of the Zhezkazgan court is now being appealed in the regional court by Kazakhmys representatives.
Your Honor, we object to using photo and video cameras in the courtroom. The first appeal from Kazakhmys representatives was not surprising. They demanded to ban video recording in the courtroom. However, this time, Judge Aygul Vajabayeva said there was nothing secret about the labor dispute. Both company lawyers contested the decision of the Zhezkazgan's court in favor of their ex-worker. Evgeny Zavadsky managed to convince the court that he was fired without a valid reason and won a compensation of $3,500 on top of reinstatement in a prior position. Employers are now convincing the regional court that Zavadsky resigned voluntarily. However, the worker assures that he wrote a letter of resignation under pressure. Judge Bajabayeva decided to summon witnesses of the labor conflict to the next trial to recount. This spring, equipment mechanic Zavadskyi actively participated in actions to increase employees' wages. On March 22nd, Kazakh workers were planning to hold a rally. Zavadskyi told the press at the time that his dismissal is related to his strike activities. I thought this was over, but they needed to crush me. This is a big corporation after all. I'm hoping that everything will be done according to law.
Dosor and Makat villages in the Atarau region face the risk of destruction due to their vicinity to a gas pipeline currently laid by Italian giant Egypt KKO. Social activists also claim the works are being done in violation of all building codes and safety standards without the consent of competent authorities and in open defiance to Kazakhstan legislation.
The company also violated construction norms and regulations. In particular, the following does not comply with the specified rules: the distance between center line of surface and subsurface pipelines, as well as pipeline embankments to settlements, industrial and agricultural buildings, and other constructions. Residents of the villages claim that the company lays gas export pipeline too close to residential premises. There are abandoned oil wells in the area, and they increase the overall risk. The Regional Department of Emergency Situations and the District Prosecutor's Office pointed out numerous violations of Agip KCO committed during construction, yet the works haven't been suspended. To every statement of outraged citizens, the company's management promises to relocate them to safer grounds and pay compensation. The villagers, however, do not want to relocate despite the hazard. On Thursday, village residents appealed to the General Prosecutor's Office and the Ministry of Oil and Gas to stop the construction of the pipeline and to move it to a safer area on top of checking the legitimacy of the foreign company's operations in Kazakhstan, which some public figures say is patronized by senior government officials. I don't even know how they managed to pull this off. They are clearly in charge here. They don't follow Kazakh laws.
Counter-accusations towards Russian Federal Space Agency were voiced by the head of the Kazakhstan Space Agency, Talgat Musabayev, on Thursday during an online conference in Astana. The official alleges rocket launches from Baikonur are delayed by the fault of the Russians themselves. It took Roscosmos 2 years to review the intergovernmental agreement that sets out new areas for the landing of launched rocket debris. Now the Russian agency is asking Kazakhstan authorities to approve the regulation within a single month, the terms deemed impossible by the Roscosmos head.
It needs to be enforced by an intergovernmental agreement, that's all there is to it. The draft has been sent to the Russian Federation more than 2 years ago. It came back to us a month ago, just 1 week before Vladimir Putin's official visit. It is impossible to coordinate this draft agreement with all state agencies of Kazakhstan in just 1 week. Arguments came about after rocket hazardous debris landed on Kazakhstan territory, which was not specified in agreements. The last 3 launches were delayed altogether because Russians had changed the spacecraft's trajectories. In such cases, according to the Roscosmos head, the landing sites for rocket debris must be regulated by an intergovernmental agreement because they refer to Kazakhstan's territories. Even before that, the document must be coordinated with the appropriate ministries and ratified by the country's parliament. In general, it needs to go through all the obligatory bureaucratic approvals. However, having not waited for these official procedures to complete, Roscosmos accused the officials in Astana of intentional delay of the launches and even declared a possible ban. The argument has entered the political dimension and needed to be resolved at the highest level. After Putin's June visit to Astana, the sides seem to have reached an agreement, but as the recent developments show, the issue hasn't been resolved completely.
The head of the National Bank, Grigory Marchenko, made an appearance in the Senate on Thursday. The banker reassured senators that the tenge exchange rate will remain stable and there is no cause for the devaluation of the national currency. At the same time, Marchenko noted that world market food prices are falling, which is not good for the Kazakhstan economy, as domestic exporters may suffer losses despite the declining inflation.
A little later, Grigory Marchenko proceeded to speak on the subject of the pension system, stating that it is not going to face bankruptcy. According to the head of the National Bank, the profitability of pension funds accumulated over the years is 1.5 times higher than inflation. MPs inspired by Marchenko's statements seem to have forgotten about their old grudges against the official. They unanimously praised him for his competence, and even his longtime opponent, Gani Kasimov, did not criticize the banker for his rare visits to the upper chamber. Later in the lobby, reporters asked Marchenko's position on the controversial topic of raising the retirement age for women. Think Turkey, where President Süleyman Demirel came to power more than 30 years ago. His winning strategy during the election campaign was a promise to lower the retirement age to 42 years for men and 38 for women. He did win the elections and actually fulfilled his campaign promises. But that, of course, bankrupted Turkish social insurance system. Right now, Turkey, with the standards of living not that different than in Kazakhstan, is back to the retirement age of 65 years for both men and women. That's it.
A real tropical heat enveloped the South Kazakhstan region for several days in a row. Air temperatures stayed at the level of 40 degrees Celsius in the shade. The tremendous heat added to the work of medics, who report an almost 10% rise in cardiology patients.
People are trying to find solace from the scorching heat by any means possible, including cold drinks and refreshing ponds. This caused the overcrowding of local beaches, forcing rescuers to step up their operation. In the meantime, children occupied all city fountains, despite the questionable quality of the water. It is the hardest time for the senior population, with the number of emergency calls increased, as is typical for the season. Doctors urge residents to be careful and stay at home to avoid walking under the heat. At this stage of the heat wave, especially during these scorching days, the blood gets thicker and therefore people dehydrate very fast through sweating. Spontaneous blood clots may form and lead to myocardial infarctions and higher blood pressure. Individuals suffering from high blood pressure need to try and stay in the shade these days. The number of calls with heart attacks or high blood pressure is up by 7% over the past 5 days.
Animated feature Batır Jurek, internationally Disney's Brave, rolled out in theaters dubbed in Kazakh on Thursday. However, based on prior experience, film experts doubt the Kazakh version will be as popular as the Russian one.
Бұл менің әкем, ал мынау анам, ал мыналар інілерім мен қарындастарым. Жүгірмектер, оларға бүкіл патшалық тәнті болды.
Characters in a new Disney Pixar animated film will be speaking Kazakh. Voice actor Samat Kordabay will lend his talent as well. The eagerly anticipated Brave will be released locally as Batır Jurek. I am the narrator of the film, and I believe it is always interesting to dub cartoons. Everyone wants to go back to a carefree childhood. I don't know about others, but I personally like it. 2 weeks were needed to make animated characters speak the state language, recalls dubbing director Ayjan Shamshitova, although voice casting was actually a more complicated process than dubbing itself. According to strict rules set by the Disney company, every animated character must have at least 3 professional actors tried for the role. We invite specific actors, as it is always possible that several of them will fit the role, and we must send back 3 sample voices for each main character. Brave's Kazakh dubbing cost a little over $120,000. The distributor hopes to recoup the costs after the movie is released. Unfortunately, these hopes may not come true. A good example is the recent blockbuster Men in Black 3. After 3 weekends, the Russian dub picked up almost $1.5 million, whereas the Kazakh one, called Kara Kimdeler Ush, barely scraped $13,000. Compare this with Jaujurek Min Bala, a local film in Kazakh with good production values. Quite impressively, it was well received to the tune of almost $1 million. Having analyzed the box office, film critic Karim Kadirbayev concludes that local moviegoers have yet to learn to appreciate foreign films dubbed into the state language. However, productions targeting certain audiences have seen noticeable success. The expert predicts that the situation will change in several years. This has only been done for 2 years, and I believe that in time, 5 or 6 years, the public will get used to it. That is, right now, dubbing cannot bring you box office, because we just do not have professional voice actors trained specifically for dubbing. Also, the audience is not yet ready to watch movies in Kazakh. Andrei Manulov is one of the people who gets the audience ready for the new voices. Disney official representative explains that adapted movies, along with their aesthetic value, also have an educational function. But Kazakhstan is not able to translate even the most notable of new films, even though the state is interested in developing Kazakh as a language. Unfortunately, we cannot dub all films that are released. It's just too expensive. We look for sponsors, and in this case we founded an Altın Kıran Foundation, which promotes state language. This is not a promotion, but it's done in support of state language. We're trying to be compliant with the law as much as we can. At the advanced screening of Batır Jurek, critics seem to like what they saw, saying the animated feature has all the chances to join other box office champs. Ultimately, though, this will be determined only by Kazakhstan's moviegoers.
Russian legendary rock singer and the voice of the 80s and 90s generation Viktor Tsoi would have turned 50 on Thursday, June 21st. He was one of the first to openly sing about freedom, and his songs still inspire millions across the globe.
Almaty residents marked the 50th anniversary of late Viktor Tsoi, the legendary Soviet rock star. 10 bands gathered to pay him tribute and play the hits of Tsoi's band Kino. The lyrics of the rebellious 80s are relevant as ever in the present setting. Viktor Tsoi was a phenomenal person who thrived as a rock producer. He was the spirit of that time. He's the poet who wrote lyrics relevant to the era. Young people are closer to truth and they sense sincerity in the line between truth and lie.
This is all we have time for now. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned.